Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode, our fifth episode, actually, of Dear Authors. My name is Janee Brown, and I am the founder and the senior publisher of Open Book Publishing. And every Wednesday, Open Book Publishing hosts Dear Authors to connect aspiring authors and published authors with the ins and outs of all things publishing. So typically, you guys know we interview service providers, publishing professionals, and sometimes even published authors. But today we're doing things a little different, and we're actually doing a show that has been a big request called Ask the Publisher, where authors has an opportunity to ask myself all the questions that you need to know about writing and publishing a book. And so we have a special guest here today who is a representative, if you will, of aspiring and or published authors. So before we get started, let me bring up our special guest, Mr. Brandon Okpalobi. Oh, wait, you're
And
muted, Brandon. Oh, we can hear you now. Talk.
hey, happy
Hey,
to be here. Thank you for bringing me in. Can you hear me?
we can hear you. We can hear you. Hey, sir, how are
Good.
you?
Oh, I'm blessed. Happy to be here. Happy to have this conversation with you today.
Good, good. So before we get started, Brandon, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. Brandon Okpalobi, as you can see, author extraordinaire, but aspiring author, I would say. But no, I'm the CEO of Dibia Athletic, where we promote excellence through athletics. The founder of Dibia Dream, where we spark social change through STEM and recreational education. And also now the president of Science, where we are expanding and changing the way people look at science through educational tools around the country. Also a STEM host on Discovery Education for the show called Hands on STEM. So I'm just a little busy, but happy to be here.
That's super, super dope. You're like the Bill Nye the science guy. I love it. I love it. So, Brandon, you are very big on STEM, very big on children and engagement, but you are also an author extraordinaire. Help us understand.
Yeah, I am in the process of writing I believe, a great book. So hopefully I will figure out some time to finalize these couple chapters that are left. But
Mhm.
I think for me, it's been a process of finding the space to write, but then also too, it's taken a longer time, which has added more, I would say, key material for the book. So.
Gotcha. And is this the only book idea you have, or do you have like multiple book ideas?
I think that's another thing that's prolonged. And I have tons
Yeah.
of ideas in my head: children's books, fiction, nonfiction, all kind of different things. So now I'm focused on one book, and then I can, address the rest later.
Well, that's the key, starting with one, because a lot of people, especially creatives like yourself, they have 1,000 book ideas. Like I've had book ideas since I was 13. They're all sitting from now my diary now to a Google Doc. And to just start with one, it was so helpful because people tend to write 7 books at a time and take
Right.
17 years to not finish. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you have narrowed it down to just one book for sure.
Yeah, and I understand that because I think at first I was on a trip to South Africa and I was like, oh,
Mhm.
I'll write some kids book about nature or about STEM. And then I was on a flight to Bermuda maybe 4 or 5 years later, and I was like, you haven't put a pen to paper at all. And then
Wow.
I wrote the first chapter of uh, my book, I would say. I'm
Mhm.
not sure the exact angle, but I wrote the first chapter, and then I was so excited. Wrote the second, third, fourth, and fifth, and then I put pieces of the other 5 or 6 chapters, but did not add enough meat yet. So that's where I'm
Gotcha.
at right now.
Got you, got you. Okay, so today's episode is Ask a Publisher. So what you got for me? What questions do you have? Don't grill me, Brandon.
No, I'm gonna jump in into this question that I kind of talked about already: is how do writers really combat writer's block, right? Like, how do we find the time? How do we pull ideas together? What are some of the tools that you may have
Mhm.
that you may know of to really help with that?
Sure. So I want to first say that writer's block is something that is very, very common. I
Right.
have multiple articles published. I have books that are published. I know people who have been way more successful on New York Best Time Sellers, and we all have had writer's block. So I definitely want to dispel that myth that if you have writer's block, it's not because you're a quality author or a
Right.
quality writer and you shouldn't be writing a book. Like that is not true. It's very common, right? And so
Right.
what I do is I do what we have at OBP called writing sprints. So I
Okay.
wrote my up and coming book published like a pro. I wrote it in 8 days. And what I did was, seriously, what I did was I had 1 hour, one day, and one chapter, where for this
Right.
hour, I woke up every day at 6:30. I said my prayers, I did my devotional, I got my tea, I turned on Jill Scott, and from 7 to 8 I just wrote. And after I was done writing, that was it. I didn't
Yeah.
look at it, I didn't edit it. All I did was take the information that was in my head and put it on paper. Now, to do that, it's important that we do what we talked about in like middle school when you were learning how to write, that pre-planning that you hated to do then.
Right.
I
Exactly.
structured, we don't like to do it then, but you see, when you start to write a book, especially a non-fictional book, that is necessary for you to be able to write a book in 8 days, because I
Right.
had planned what I was going to write. I understood what, as an author, I wanted the reader to take away. What was the reader's purpose? Why would they even grab the book? And how can I take them from where they are now to where I want them to be at the end of the book? So I wrote out how I take you from A to B. So if I'm teaching you how to bake cookies, what do you need to know by the end of the book to bake cookies? All that is
Right.
in between. And those became like chapter ideas. And so I
Okay.
came up with 8. And so that's how I knew I was going to write this book in 8 days. And 7
Okay.
a.m. to 8 p.m. with T and Jill Scott, we cranked it up.
No, and I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's amazing because I've heard you mention that before, and I think as I related to sports, right? You got to put
Mhm.
down or practice, right? You got to have a practice plan. You don't just go to practice, and I think that that's something that I've struggled with. And I'm pretty sure other aspiring authors as well. Is that you may write something, but then you're trying to edit the book at the same time, right? So you're trying to write and edit, which you know probably
It's
isn't
no
the
bueno.
best. But
It's no
then
bueno.
you'll write something and then you'll jump and have an idea, but while you're writing you jump and have another idea, so
Mhm.
at the end of the day you're bouncing around to all these ideas but you haven't completed any of the ideas. So I think that plan is something that's important.
Yeah.
So I have a plan though. I do have a plan.
Yeah. You should
uh,
have a plan, sir. I'm sure
mm,
I've gifted you some plans.
we're not,
Jab.
that's not
Yep.
what we're talking about. That's not what we're here to talk about.
But yeah, so what else you got? Did I answer your question though? Was
You
that good?
did.
Okay.
You did. So my next question is how should someone or a writer structure their publishing rights or their contract? What does that look like? Because I think that once you write it out and then you find a publisher and things like that, it's really about understanding the business side, right? And then
Yeah.
we've seen that a lot with different aspects or different fields that someone will do the work but they don't understand the business side. So how do they make sure that they're understanding the business side, but also get the best deal for their intellectual property?
So the first thing I would tell you is to go watch episode 4 of Dear Authors, because we had our intellectual
Okay.
property lawyer. And so she had a lot of information when it comes to that. The second thing I would tell authors is to understand the differences in publishing, right?
Hmm.
So there is traditional publishing, there's self-publishing, then there's also something called hybrid publishing, and there's
Okay.
also companies who do publishing servicing. So publishing servicing is just that they're essentially going to help you be a self-publisher, where they'll give you an editor, they'll give you a formatter,
Okay.
things of that sort. Very parallel to a hybrid publisher. A hybrid
Okay.
publisher, the only difference is they can do traditional or self-published books, but their goal probably is to do traditional books only in the setting of owning the rights to your book or owning the imprint to your book, which is
Gotcha.
determined by the ISBN number. That is, let me grab a book really quick. The
Okay.
ISBN number is like, when you buy any product, you have a SKU
Hmm.
number.
Right.
For books, it's called the ISBN number. I don't know
Okay,
if you can
gotcha.
see that, but
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
sold separately than the barcode. So also FYI, if you're self-publishing, you have to buy the barcode and the ISBN number. They are sold separately. And so, what you need to do for self published authors is you need to understand that you own the rights and the royalties to your book. So, there is no contract on the self publishing side. On the traditional publishing side, you need to understand what does that publisher want. So, like for open book publishing, we maintain the rights, but you maintain the royalties. So, that means
Okay.
that when you register or somebody looks up open book publishing's catalog, your book is going to be included in that. It's going to, when you open the book, it's going to say that open book publishing, this is the book as an imprint of open book publishing. But
Okay.
all the royalties to your book, meaning all your book sales, regardless of where they're sold, on your personal page, on Amazon, at Barnes and Nobles, we don't take the rights to the royalties rather to any of your book sales.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
I think for authors, they need to understand who owns the royalties and who owns the rights. Long
Right.
story short,
Right.
because the rights is the ISBN number, the imprint, and the royalties is the book sales. My recommendation is to get your book sales. That is the most important. But if you're going to a major publishing house, they're going to take a percentage of your book sales because they're doing all of the work and that's how they maintain their company. So when it comes to that, I think you have to pick and choose what matters to you. If you got a book advance and you have to share your royalties, are you okay with that? If you're a
Right.
first time author who may be publishing on your own or publishing with a publishing company to get picked up by a publishing house, you may not have to have those level of negotiations. So what is key is looking up who owns the rights to your book because that
Right.
determines what you get to do with your book afterwards. Who
Right.
owns the royalties to your book because that determines how you get paid. And what autonomy do you have? Who has the final say on the editing? Who has the final say on the book cover? Who has the final say on all of the ins and outs of the actual product of your book?
Right.
That's the types of things that you should look for when it comes to your publishing agreement with the publishing company.
And that leads into my next question about
Mhm.
the book cover, the design, the aesthetic, marketing. Where or how much leeway do you have as far as ideas, thoughts on like, hey, I want my books at this bookstore, or I want to go on a book tour, different
Mhm.
things like that. How is that really thought about, and is it recommended? I know I'm like layering the question, but also
Yeah.
too, it's like, okay, because you'll see people do a book tour and that works for them, or they have a large social media following. So what's the best way also too to kind of get the book out in front of the right people or the right audience?
Okay, so let's answer the first question first, which is really about like autonomy, right? About
Hmm.
who, if you have the right to or the flexibility to include your thoughts in the product of the book. Is
Right.
that the question essentially? The
Yes.
the author has say so,
Okay.
but the publisher has the final say if the publisher owns the imprint, meaning own the rights to your book.
Okay.
If you're working at for with a publishing servicing company or a hybrid company, they may tell you you can have the ISBN. But
Hmm.
like for open book publishing, we have the imprint. So I'm not going to let
Okay.
you put out a book cover that I don't agree with. I'm not going to let you not accept certain edits or make certain edits or not have the final say in the book. I'm going to consider your thoughts 1,000% because it's your book. But if you are going to tell me, hey, I want to write a book about nature,
Hmm.
and then you have a cover that has rockets on it because you like rockets, I'm going to tell you no. And that's going to be the end
Right.
of it. Because a lot of times, what your publisher is going to challenge you on is their understanding of what is the industry standard.
Okay.
So I also think that authors should look at their relationship with the publisher like a partnership. You should
Right.
definitely voice your opinion and communicate things. I think when it comes to edits and the final manuscript, there is a tug of war sometimes when the publishing company feels like you should say this and you're not ready to talk about that. Or
Right.
you say, I want to, there's been plenty of times and I'm like, this whole chapter could go. We're not putting that in the book.
I've heard
Sorry.
that before.
Because it's not necessary with the flow of the book. Now,
Right.
I think there's a difference between a publisher telling you no and a publisher telling you no with intention. And I
Right.
think that there is a understanding that both the author and the publisher has to have when it comes to the publisher knows what they're doing. They're in this industry, they have success. And the author, a lot of times we have to ask the question, is this necessary or are you just married to this?
Right. No, I agree. I think those questions are key from both sides. And I think that
Mhm.
looking at it as a partnership is the best way possible, right? We're both trying to maximize the impact of this book, right? And how do we do that at the end of the day? And so we're not trying to do anything detrimental. We want to make sure, hey, we get this right in front of the right people. The chapters are laid out a certain way, marketing, the cover, aesthetic, all that goes together. So,
Mhm.
no, I agree with that. And
Mhm.
so, I mentioned I was walking into this beautiful space. Thank you to Baldwin and company for letting me use the space. But, and I saw it said the top, um, I can't remember the title, top people in New York Times bestsellers. And
Mhm.
so I know, you'll see someone write a book and they'll say, oh, I'm an Amazon bestseller or things like that. How does one become a Amazon or New York Times bestseller?
I love this question. So, first, let's clarify some things, okay? All bestseller lists are category based.
Hmm.
Okay, so you're getting bestseller in the category that you selected when you listed your book for distribution.
Now let
So,
me interject 1 second.
uh-huh,
Is that also important as well,
yeah,
where you label your
categorize.
book, categorize? Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me tell you
Okay.
why. Because let's say you wrote a book on STEM, Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? You wrote a book on STEM, and the book was on what do we do? Nature. It was on nature, right? So nature is one of the categories that you selected. But currently, the only quantity of books in the nature category on Amazon is 12. It's going to be
Okay.
very easy for you to become a Amazon bestseller in the nature category because there's only
Right.
12 books there,
Right.
right? So there is definitely a game when it comes to bestseller because there's categories. And if you are ranked at a higher percentage in the category, then you become
Hmm.
bestseller. Now, Amazon has over 20,000 categories. Like categories on
Okay.
categories on like nature, all the things you teach kids and then broken down and broken down and broken down some more. Why they have all these categories, one will never know. Versus like
Right.
New York Times bestseller, for example, I think they only have like max 20. And I think I'm
Okay.
being very, very generous. So it's a little bit more competitive to make New York
Mm.
Times bestseller. What people tend to do, and I love to give the example of Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama wrote her book, and granted, she was Michelle Obama, okay? But nevertheless, she wrote her book, and the only thing you need to sell your book is a book cover and an
Hmm.
ISBN number, right?
Right.
And a place to funnel people to buy. So she
Yeah.
got a sales page, a book cover, and before her book was probably written,
Yeah. I
she was
remember that.
selling the book.
I bought a copy.
And so
I think she sold like a
pre-sale
million before or something like that, or
before, and
pre-sales.
she probably hadn't even wrote the book yet. So I
Right.
said that to say that pre-sales can start as early as a year in advance to your book,
Mm.
regardless of where you're distributing, right? This
Right.
includes Amazon, okay? And so the sales from your pre-sale are included in the calculation
Okay.
for you being determined as a bestseller on
Okay.
any
Okay.
platform. Okay. With that, I want to say the first 30 to 60 days, depending
Yeah, I was
on
gonna say
the
there's a time frame, right?
there's a time
Okay.
frame from if you published your book January 1st, I want to say 30 to 60 days within that window determines if
Mhm.
you're a bestseller. But if you've been doing a pre-sale for a year, all those sales get included in that 30-day window. That's one.
So
Mhm.
when the book is actually printed and launched, that's when the 30 days or 60 days starts. So your pre-sales jump into, okay.
That's exactly
That's
right.
interesting.
Now, specific, so that's Amazon bestseller, right? When it comes to New York Times bestsellers and those other locations, your book sale count to determine if your bestseller has to go beyond web-based sales. So that's why
Okay.
you'll see individuals put their book on in the actual bookstore for Barnes and Nobles or Books
Gotcha.
and Books. They'll put them in Walgreens because what classifies as book sales is beyond web-based sales the way Amazon is. Amazon's only web-based because Amazon's only web-based, but New York Times bestseller, they're looking at it from a more generalized population, if you will. So you can't just be considered as a New York Times bestseller because you sold so many books online.
Gotcha.
Okay. So yeah, it's a
Um,
whole thing.
yeah, I was gonna say it's like a whole equation because I didn't know the whole
Mhm.
pre-sale component, but I think that's key for those sales.
Yeah.
And so I switched from hard copy or reading books
Hmm.
in hand to Audible, right?
Hmm.
And so do those sales factor in is the first question. The second question of that is, do you recommend people do an Audible book and things like that?
I recommend, and you know me personally, Janae's all about the Benjamin, like the end
Right, for
period.
sure, for sure.
So if you could have your product in multiple formats and sell at multiple spaces, you get more money.
Right.
So I will always recommend to sell the book in any way it comes, right?
Okay.
Especially and I can't even categorize that because what I was about to say was a lot of people take nonfiction books or information based books, like a book that you're writing, as a way to jumpstart their morning, and they're listening to it in the
Gotcha.
car and stuff like that. Like, think about what type of books you listen to in the car versus what type of books you listen to when when you're working or when you're working out.
Right.
All those books tend to be informational books like your Atomic Habits and your
Hmm.
Power of the Circles and all those types of books, right?
Right.
So I highly recommend informational based authors or nonfiction authors to definitely do audiobook if they do nothing else, because that's where your readers tend to read. People
Right.
who are gaining information like yourself, right? You are busy. You're not sitting down reading a book, but while you are driving in the car, you're listening to a
Right.
book.
Right.
Your readers are going to be like you. So
Yeah.
audiobooks are, if they benefit you, they're benefiting your reader, right? So I
Right.
definitely recommend audiobooks. And then when we think about like fictional books, when you have children's books, I have been in the car with my nieces and nephews on a road trip. God help me. And what saved us was putting on an audio book of
Right.
whatever they were reading during the car ride. I was bored out of my mind, but the kids was quiet. So I do think that it could work. I know people who adults who read nonfictional books.
Hmm.
Um, and the books are like a romantic novel, but it's something that they listen to when they're doing road trips, like how people
Right.
listen to like those detective shows on the like AM station. It's the
Yeah.
same situation. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely recommend audiobooks.
Yeah.
And
So I've picked out my studio. It's at G Jam Studio in Portland, Jamaica. So I've already picked out where I'm doing my audiobook. Uh, so my next question
mhm.
is, you see this all the time. I think one of my friends, she just wrote a book and she went to a cabin. And some people, they'll go to a beach for a week. Some people go to a cabin. Some people go to an island. Do you recommend, with the sprint that you mentioned earlier, that someone just block off a week or a certain allotted time and be secluded so where they can get their ideas together and focus on the book. I think Barack did the same thing with his book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think that you do whatever you got to do.
Right.
Um, I find, especially, I feel like there is an emerging of authors who are
Hmm.
um, community leaders, who are
Right.
young professionals, who possibly are parents. Um, if they are not small business owners, they definitely have a side hustle. So,
Right.
nevertheless, what I'm getting at is these people are constantly being stimulated and constantly being touched. And if you need to seclude yourself, that's what you do. That's
Right.
why I um chose 7 a.m. because open book
Mm.
publishing opens at 10 a.m. And
Okay.
at 9:09, OBP is blowing me up. It's not even the family and the friends. It's open book publishing. Love my team, but they blowing
Right.
me up. At 7 a.m., some of them are working, but they're not talking to me. 7 a.m., there's
Okay.
nobody up but me and God. So I
Right.
could,
Right.
right, that was my seclusion. That was me going to a cabin. But I think if going to a cabin is something that will be helpful for you, do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm always trying to get on an island. So any reason to be on an island, uh, concentrating on putting this book together, I'm all for it.
I
So
support the
yeah.
movement. It looks like we have a lot of questions from
Okay.
the audience. Um, and so one of the questions that I saw was, how can Black writers really break into the market as a
That's a
writer?
great question.
I think Black authors, especially Black women, are at an advantage because
Hmm.
there is a lot happening where people are being very intentional about being politically correct. So I
Right.
think there's a space for acceptance and a space for curiosity. I think that the
Mm.
world loves our culture, and if anybody should be communicating our culture, it should be us.
I
I think
100% agree with that.
you know what I mean? I think one of my quarrels is that when we talk about history books, when we talk about culture, when we talk about history, it doesn't include my grandmother's stories. It doesn't
Right.
include none of those things. But that's because what is narrated and the story that is always told in the masses is what was published, right? Your
Hmm.
kids only learn about slavery at school because it was published in a textbook. Your
Right.
kids only learn about Maya Angelou and Martin Luther King because it was published in a book that went with their summer reading list, right?
Right.
We
Right.
have to be intentional about writing books that communicate our story and publishing it so that it cannot be erased. So I
Of
think for
course.
Black writers, do it. I almost cursed, but do it.
there's a
I,
there's a proverb that says everyone will believe the hunter until the lion tells his story,
mhm,
his or her story, right? And I think that
yeah.
everything that you're saying right there is very important. And I think that sometimes we only hear this story from one side, or we are forced to ask because of our curiosity, and then we get a history lesson or understanding what actually took place for us to operate in the space that we operate in, right? And so
Mhm,
I think
mhm.
that one thing we have to do is understand and go after history, right? Go after the facts, go after understanding what is actually out there and what actually took place, but then also put that within our stories, right? I think sometimes we look at our story as only, or I'm looking from my perspective of my book, is I'm writing about me and my experiences, but my
Mhm,
experiences were molded prior to me even being thought about, right? And
mhm.
so some of that is, depend how far you go back, but if you bring that into the context of the story, people can start to see the full picture and
Yeah.
understand the full story as you're trying to paint it towards them. So I agree with that.
And then also to add to that is also think about representation,
Hmm.
right? yes, your book is about your story, your experiences, but you'll be surprised how many people can identify with your
Right.
story, right? Like,
Right.
even if you're talking about fatherhood, right? Fatherhood is
Hmm.
not a new story, but
Right.
B version might really connect to Black men in your age group, in your situations, and things of that
Of
sort. So it
course.
helps them to feel represented. Because when we talk about fatherhood, we're talking about it generically, or we're only talking about
Hmm.
it these types of fathers. But
Right.
your story on fatherhood is going to connect to a very different audience, and those
Yeah.
people need to be seen in literature. Those people need to be seen in books,
Hmm.
because that makes people want to read books. Think about, like, when we were growing up, I hated reading books. Oh my God, I hated reading because they wasn't about me. They didn't look like
Right.
me. They weren't talking
Right.
about me. And because my mother exposed me to Black authors is what made
Right.
me now enjoy reading, to the point that I have a publishing company. So
Right.
I
Right.
so I think that is definitely space for Black
Hmm.
writers. And if there's not space, you can create space. If you can't create space and you need support, Open Book Publishing got you.
No, I agree 100%. That was a great question. I think we have
Um,
another question as well.
there was another question that asked about something about audiobooks that I saw. Tips for audiobooks, I think it
Hmm.
was.
Yeah.
Um, Here's my tip. Very, very, very important. Brandon talked about a studio. Everybody is not as fancy, but it's important to do this, to get you a quality microphone, because that microphone is what is going to be used to, I can't with you. The microphone is necessary to make sure that your audiobook is recorded at top-notch quality. You do
Right.
not want to record your audiobook on your phone, on voice memo, because the audio isn't quality. I don't care if you do have an iPhone 14. You need a
Right.
quality professional microphone. So making sure that you're in a space where the acoustics are good
Hmm.
is very important for sound. I also think it's important for you to work with a producer. And the reason why I said that is because your audiobook is not going to sound like your manuscript.
Right.
Our audiobook team actually writes a script for the author
Mm.
to follow,
Okay.
especially for books that are nonfiction, right? Where there's a
Right.
story. You're not going to be like, Janee said, Brandon replied. A lot of
Right.
those things you can skip, and you'll
Right.
actually just have the dialogue. So I recommend also writing a script specifically for fictional authors to help you read the right stuff when it
Hmm.
comes to your audiobook. I also recommend to consider having somebody else to do it if you don't feel comfortable with your voice. I think it
Okay.
should always be in your voice, because I think that adds
Right.
cultural context. But for
Hmm.
people who are shy, hire somebody. So
Yeah, because I've noticed that the books that, well, not all the different books, right? You can see, um, and especially me, like even when sometimes I'm the producer when I'm doing stuff for Discovery, they'll be like, "Bring your energy up," right? So sometimes
mhm,
I'll go deep into the science, and then I'll get into it, but my energy goes down, right? You want to
mhm.
make sure the story is compelling. You keep your energy up, but then also too hearing it from their viewpoint. Like when I
Yeah,
listen to um, any book that Oprah reads, amazing,
yeah.
amazing. I don't care what she's reading; it's amazing. But then you hear different people, and they'll ad lib, right? Because that's
Mhm,
important to the story. Maybe they
mhm.
couldn't get it into the manuscript, but it was important into the story, and it adds. It brings me to wherever they are right now, right? I'm
Yeah.
in the story. I'm that person. I feel their emotions. I get everything. So I think that's
What
very smart.
what you're talking about, Brandon, is additional characters. Like, if you think
Mm.
about any Disney movie, when you watch the behind the scenes, they're doing the voice narrations, and you
Right.
like see the actors narrating the movie to match the script, or to match
Right.
the comic, to create the um cartoon, right? It's the same thing with the audiobook. So they hire additional voiceovers.
Okay.
where you could, especially like for a fictional book, if Janee and Brandon are speaking, Brandon can't do Janae's voice, right?
Right.
Janee says she can't talk to you, hire somebody. But also to your non-fictional book, it's like Oprah's book. You have people commenting and ad lib that brings content to
Hmm.
context rather, and it also sets the mood. Books
Right.
are
Right.
entertaining fundamentally, right?
Right.
So you want to create the vibe.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I agree.
so yeah, do we have another question? If you are a new author without a huge following, are local book signing events still relevant and effective, or should you focus on social media marketing and promotions? That
That's a
is a
great question.
really good question. So I think if you are a new author without a huge following, I think that we need to clarify two things. One, you can get a huge following. It's not the end
Right.
of the world. You can definitely develop a following. And two, it's okay that you don't have a following that is huge because you're not writing to everybody.
Right.
That is a unpopular opinion, but you have to write to your reader and sell to your reader. Your reader
Right.
is not the 7 billion people in the world, and that's okay. Work your community, use what's in your hands because that's going to help you develop your following and get connected to other people who are attracted to the book that you are publishing. Okay.
Right.
And then, are local book signing events still relevant and effective? Absolutely. I definitely recommend to become what my mentor calls it, a hometown hero, where
Okay.
people in your city, people in your state, they know you. Brandon can't walk through Miami or New Orleans without people knowing him. He's a hometown hero, right?
Not at all. Not at
Whatever.
all. No one knows
So
me.
it's important that you are engaging in your community, engaging in the local bookstores in your community, engaging with the big stores in your community, and getting to know the
Right.
general managers. Because I said every episode, I don't care if you traditional publish or self-publish. When it comes to being an author, there is a big level of entrepreneurship involved in it,
Oh
and the
yeah. Sure.
success in your book is on you. So you need to get out and do what my dad says and shake hands and kiss babies. Straight up no chaser. So definitely make those connections so that you can host those events. And also you can host book signings in spaces that are not bookstores. You can be very creative. You can host it at a park. You can host it at a community center. You can host it wherever is going to draw a crowd, right?
Right.
You can have multiple book signings. So if your first one isn't at the Barnes and Nobles that has the 50 billion books in your community, that's okay. Your fifth one can be.
Right.
Also, book tours do not have to be in person. So you can do virtual signings because signings don't always just include a book signing. Sometimes what a book signing looks like is an author having a one-on-one with a reporter
Right.
and or an author, and then afterwards there's books that already are pre-signed and then people buy the book, right? There's
Right.
opportunities where there's book readings where you host an event that's private, that's virtual, that you have virtual tickets to. People pay to attend. It's a virtual event. You read some chapters in your book. You do some Q&As, and then people got the ticket to your event when they purchase your book, or they
Right.
have a promo code at the end of your event to purchase the book. So you could create whatever type of book signing you want.
No, I think all of that is dope. I was thinking that as you were saying it because I think now that we have this virtual space that I think that we understand a lot more is that you can do all that. If you write a book and then now they buy your book, now you're doing intimate settings, right? So you have intimate settings virtually, and then you can also do them in person. And so
Mm-hmm.
you send the books out. There's a Q&A. You may have something like this where someone asks you questions. You read a chapter or two. People can ask you a question like, what did you actually mean here? What actually happened here? I think all of those things are amazing. So there's so many ways now to provide that experience, like I
Mm-hmm.
like to talk about now, is providing that experience when someone purchases something for you from you. That will separate you from other people. So I
Yeah.
think that's great.
Yeah, I think it's I empower people, authors or not, to be creative because to your point about experience, people are going to remember how you treated them, right?
Oh, for sure.
And the vibe that you create, what makes you different, what makes Brandon book signing different from Janae's book signing is what people are going to remember at the book
Oh yeah.
signing.
Yeah.
And I think that it needs to be a personality curated because again, you are connecting to your reader and your reader is attracted to you for a specific reason. So create an experience for them, and you won't miss. You definitely won't miss.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome right there.
So, B, what other questions you got for me while we wait for the audience to send in some more questions?
Let's see. Did I have any more questions? I think that was most of my questions, but one that I'm thinking about now is when you write your first book,
Mm-hmm.
right? If there is a second book, what should that is there a time frame that you think is best? Because you'll see people knock out books, year after year. They drop them like albums, um, or
Another
you,
one.
or another, or they drop them where okay, it took a couple years, a couple experiences. How do you suggest someone if they write one book, what's next for them, right? Should they write another book? And what does that look like?
Is this person a career author or aspiring to become a career author?
That's up in the air.
Okay.
If you're asking this young man, he's just trying to he's trying to get book one out.
So the reason why I'm asking is I think for an individual who's aspiring to be a career author, who is new in the industry and who is not connected to a large publishing company that has this grand marketing, it's important that you don't lose momentum. But
Gotcha.
momentum does not have to be a book every 6 months. I
Hmm.
don't even recommend that because I feel like within 6 months, you can still be working the book that you have. Right? You can be
Hmm.
writing the next book, but there's so much that you can do to leverage your current book. And I think it's
Hmm.
important that we leave nothing on the table, right?
Hmm.
Like, can you get speaking engagements? Can you create a coaching program? Can you have any collaborations? Can you be the keynote speaker at various conferences? Can you
Right.
do a college tour? What have you left on the table with your book
Hmm.
for you to flip your book? Could you create a creative writing class? Could you be now teaching people how to build robots and stuff, build nine the science guy? Like, what can you pull from your book that you haven't?
Right.
And I think that keeping momentum doesn't have to look like publishing multiple books. So, in regards to publishing a second and third book, I only think it's a timeline thing if it's a series, but I don't even think that is a big deal because I think that you can use time to create buzz.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
you can use, and while you're writing the book, creating buzz is what's going to get you to those bestsellers list, right? So
That's what
it's
we're
not
trying to do.
about dropping the book as much as it's about being relevant. And I hate to say that, but that's just the world
Oh.
that we're living in right now. So yeah, I don't think there's like a timeline, but what I will say is make sure you collected all the chips off the
Mm.
table from the first book so that when you're doing the second book, you can focus on the second book and then think about how you could marry them. That when you're doing the second book, you can find ways to incorporate both almost like a bundle, if you
Right.
will. But yeah, don't I just really believe in leaving nothing on the table and do
Right.
that first. And whatever time that takes, you're still in folks' presence. So there is no, oh, we lost her. He may not have
Right.
another book in 2 years, but he was still front and center. So
Right,
when this
right,
new book came, now the local author who had a small following now has a bigger one. So when the
right,
book drops, a lot of that stuff you ain't got to do no more because now
right.
you're here, right? So
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
so much about the product as much as it's about the presence.
Not about the product, but about the presence. Mic
Drop
drop.
that. Drop
Mic drop.
that. Okay, so we have another question for a published author who wanted to hire a publishing company to help bring their book to the forefront. Is if so, what would that look like? Okay, so a lot of authors, unfortunately, are their manuscripts are not accepted by publishing
Mm,
companies, or a larger publishing company, and especially a publishing house. Your manuscript's accepted, but they'll give you a release date like 2 to 3 years from now.
mhm.
So there are, for the authors who are not accepted, it's why they tend to go to self-publish route because they feel like that's the only way this could happen. There
Right.
are several cases where folks did self-publishing or folks went through smaller publishing companies, and that put them on the radar of publishing houses, and then they got picked up. Okay.
Okay.
So it is possible to get picked up after the fact. That's the first question.
Mhm.
And so what does that look like if you were to get picked up? It looks like a contract that you need to read very thoroughly because
Yes.
what it probably will happen is there'll be a relaunch to your book. So they might want to change the book cover. They might even
Mhm.
want to change some of the content to your book. And you need to be clear about what those changes are to relaunch your book. They're probably even going to give you a new ISBN number because now they're probably going to own the rights to your book, right?
Mm.
Because
Okay.
they picked up your book, right? Like how a show goes from one network to the other
To
network.
another. Right.
Now
Okay.
that new network is going to determine what sequence we show the show.
Right.
Or
Okay.
if the show that's still being aired, what's going to happen next season is going to be determined by that network.
Right.
So the publishing industry is very similar. Entertainment is entertainment, whether it's music, TV, movies, books, same stuff tends to happen. Um, and then I think it's important to really get clear about what is that publishing company doing for you. Are they
Right.
giving you, because a lot of people get a real nice check, but a signing bonus, like playing
Mhm.
for the NBA, and then they sit down the whole season.
Yeah.
What are they bringing to the table that you haven't
Right.
got? Because by now you are working with what's in your hand. So you want to make
Mhm.
sure that this publishing company can now do what you didn't think you could do.
Right.
And what does that look like on the marketing side? What does it look like on a book sale side? What are they guaranteeing you? Are they getting you endorsements if possibly? What is the benefit of you now being picked up, especially if you found success and learned how to do it on your own? I definitely recommend it. I definitely recommend getting behind or getting support from a larger publishing company because a lot comes with that name recognition, to be one. But I also think it's very important to make sure that you get what you deserve and what you
Right.
desire, even if it's a large publishing company, because you don't want to be sat on the bench, right?
Right.
Um,
Right. You're trying to start. Trying to win a
you
championship out here.
exacto. And then also look at your contracts for book sales or for
Mhm.
royalties is what it's going to be listed as. Look for I don't know exactly the category that it be in, but who has the autonomy if you want to do a series or if you want to make a
Gotcha.
comics script, or if you were to get a speaking engagement, do you have to share those that money as well, that revenue as well? Look at the contracts.
Also, if you want to turn it into a movie or TV series or something like that,
Mhm,
what's the science be? You know, things like that. So,
mhm,
you want to be mindful of that. My last question, on along the lines of a ghostwriter,
mm,
right? Sometimes people start writing and then they stop and they're like, okay, someone can help, or I know it's not the biggest or best way, maybe the music industry, but I feel like some people have talked about like, oh, okay, I want a ghostwriter because they can write the story better, tell the story better. What are your thoughts on that?
You're really trying to get me fired
Well,
because I I
open book.
I don't think I support the ghostwriting movement, right? I support the ghostwriting industry, but I also feel like you can do this yourself, right? Like I
Right.
wrote a book in 8 days. So I really think that if you feel inferior as a writer, that you can't bring your story to life, I think that you have to be mindful that you don't have to. That's
Right.
what your editor's job is to do, to take the dopeness in your head that you threw on
Hmm.
paper and then polish it into a finished manuscript. I
Right.
think when it comes to not having the time, you can book a trip to Jamaica in that cabin you were talking about and write the book. But I also respect the industry of ghostwriting. And I also see the value in just hiring and delegating. So if you decide to do that, I think you need to have a conversation and interview multiple ghostwriters, at least three, to
Hmm.
get an understanding of the same thing you will as a publisher. Who owns the rights to the content?
Right.
What is the turnaround time? Are they charging you per word and per hour? Or are they just charging you for hours? Why do I say that? Because
Mm.
the ghostwriter is writing the book in your voice. So they have to do a
Yeah.
lot of research. They have to do a lot of fact finding. And that has a lot to do with the time that they're spending with you. So you're not just hiring them to write, you're hiring them to research, and that
Right.
is included in their time is going to be billed to you.
Of
So
course.
I just think that you have to be clear about what ghostwriting is and why do you feel like you need one, because a lot of these things we can do on our own with just focus and discipline. um but I
Preach.
understand that some things are painful, right? Like I
Right.
have an author who got a ghostwriter because to write her story was a lot for her, and I respected that, right?
Hmm.
I have
Hmm.
another author who English isn't their first language. So the
Hmm.
editor took on a level of ghostwriting because the book was going to be produced and published rather in America and not in Haiti, and Creole was her first language. So there are
Okay.
some exceptions, but I also think that we need to be very clear before we make decisions.
I agree 100%.
Okay. Last question, follow-up question. If you self-publish your own book, can you hire a book publishing just for marketing purposes? Or will you still have to go through the process of them changing your work? Good
Mm.
question. If you work with a publishing servicing company, you do not have to relaunch your book because they're not a publishing company. They
Hmm.
are a publishing servicing company, meaning they're providing publishing services. It's like hiring a freelance agency that just have all these people in the back office. A publishing company is probably not going to market a book they didn't publish. Straight up
Okay.
no tracer. I
Mm.
personally wouldn't do it because I had no say so and no input on a lot of the marketing things that have already been done, like your book cover.
Okay.
Your
Okay.
book cover is marketing 101 when it comes to your book. And
Hmm.
if your cover is not attractive and it's already out, I can't change that. As a publisher,
Right.
it's a done deal. So most publishing companies are not going to market a book because they're not like a freelance agency. They're not a third party agency. They want to publish the whole book, right? And the
Right.
marketing is included in the publishing process and the publishing journey. Now, what you can do is connect with, and what they might do is redirect you to a marketing firm, a marketing firm and or agency that they partner with to manage the marketing and advertisement of their clients' work or of their authors' books. Because the publishing company, unless they have an internal marketing team, they probably are partnering with a agency that specializes in book marketing, right? Or book PR or book advertisement. So they could refer you to them that's already like operating like a subsidiary or an affiliate partner. Or if your only reason for wanting to go with a publishing company is for the marketing, just go to a marketing company. You don't need a publishing
Right.
company for that. It's especially because your book's already published. So if marketing is just the thing, I would just go straight to a marketing company that specializes in books, specifically in whatever genre your book is. I would niche down as much as possible because I'm assuming you've already tried to do marketing and haven't reached your goals. So if I was you, I wouldn't be in the business of continuing to roll the dice. So I will
Right.
work with and partner with a marketing company that already specializes in books and already specializes in your genre to ensure or to close the gaps, to go through the path of least resistance in
Hmm.
reaching your goals in the time frame in which you dream. So yeah, that is so important. Okay. That is all I got, good people. I was making sure we didn't have any other questions. Well, Brandon, thank you, sir, for not
Of
drilling
course.
me.
Thank you for having me. No, this was awesome. Learned a lot. Got a lot of information. So, ready to release this book. I have to do a couple of sprints to make it happen, but I'm
Yes.
ready.
Yes, yes, yes. Y'all, let's put pressure on Brandon to get the book written tomorrow. Okay. He can go to Jamaica, get the book done. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So, Brandon, can you tell our audience how they could connect with you?
Sure. On social media is at Okpalobi, Okpalobi is where you can find my personal page. For Dibia Dream is Dibia Dream on all social platforms. Dibia Athletic is Dibia Athletic. No S. People always want to put an S on athletics. And for science is Explore Science. And then our next show for Discovery Education is October 20th. We go live at 1 p.m. So make sure you go to STEM Careers Coalition. You can type that in on Google and it'll give you all the information for the live show.
Hella dope. And he says he's not the local celebrity. Stop it.
No, it's a
Stop.
kid from New Orleans.
I love it. So, good people, as you know, that all of the information to connect with Open Book Publishing is below on the screen. We are available on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and you can also always visit our website, www.obpublishing.com. We are here every Wednesday for a lunch and learn to help authors learn the ins and outs of all things publishing. And we always end off with a Dear Authors affirmation. So, this Dear Authors affirmation, I will say, Dear Authors, do what authors do and write the book. Write the book.
Write the book.
That's it. That's all. Write the book and publish the book. I think that it's important to know that we are in a privileged place where there was a time where the only people who could write a book were white men who were educated and rich and wealthy. And now we are in a time where anybody is eligible to become an author. And with your published work, you're making an imprint on culture. And that is a responsibility now that you have this privilege. So do not take it lightly and do what authors do and write the book. That is my affirmation for you guys. And thank you again, Brandon, for joining us. We appreciate you, Mr. Author Extraordinaire. And we will see you guys next Wednesday, same time, same place. Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live every Wednesday at 12:15 or 12:30 every Wednesday. See you on our next episode of Dear Authors. And until then, be well, authors.